ago has it been? When did you do the Ibogaine?
February 18th, technically February 18th was the day I did it. So,
Have you noticed any change over that period of time? Like,
and I've also been getting TMS treatments at the same time. If you guys aren't familiar with TMS, there's a couple of places here in St. Louis that do it. The place I go to is Precision TMS. It stands for Transcranial Magnetic Stimulation. They basically put a magnet on your head, and then they send an electrical current through your head. And this side of your brain is for depression, this side is for anxiety, and then the frontal lobe is for OCD, which they're also doing research on for post-traumatic stress because the symptoms of post-traumatic stress match OCD symptoms. If you guys have seen that movie Lucy with Scarlett Johansson, that's what I felt like. I mean, my awareness was like, I could feel the trees. It's like your biggest psilocybin dose. When you're like totally in touch with nature. I mean, I was like that while I'm doing email, I'm texting on my phone, I'm doing something. I mean, I felt like that character in the movie Lucy, and I was just like, oh my God. I told this guy, who's doing the TMS with me. I told Tom about this, and Tom and I were joking. We call this the afterburner protocol, and we're like, this probably should be studied, because there may be some, pretty good therapeutic effects. When you match that kind of neuroplasticity with, the treatments of TMS, and so, I'm just kind of testing it on myself, and I'm like, I feel great, so can't be that bad, right? I'm not drinking and I feel great, so, yeah.
I'm curious, what was most effective in healing PTS for you?
For me, I think it was a mixture, and so I started the VA pill carousel in 2019, and I was off of it I started the pills in 2020, right when COVID started. And then I was off of them by February 2022 or March. And so I think a lot of what did it for me was, I think just like doing like bits and chunks at it. And so like after the ayahuasca, and then I was, and then I did some psilocybin, and I was microdosing with psilocybin. But at the same time, I'm working with my therapist. And I think that kind of helped me deal with a lot of the, fear I had from like going into crowded places and that kind of stuff. But one of the things I found, it's funny, I've been talking to my therapist about this, because my therapist, he talks about, PTS, how it's kind of a wound, like breaking an ankle. And so in this documentary, In Waves and War, I'm going to warn everybody, the first 45 minutes are pretty rough. The documentary tracks 3 SEALs, and the first 30 minutes, they're talking about some of their combat missions, and they go into a lot of detail, and it triggered me. And so I had a session with my therapist. I'm like, hey, I thought you said I was cured from this. I'm like, I got triggered and had a flashback pretty bad from watching the first 30 minutes of this, and I had to turn it off. And he's like, oh shit, okay. And so, to answer your question, I don't know if there is a cure for PTS. Just like I don't know if there's a cure for brain injuries. I mean, I kind of hope what I'm doing is going to heal my brain, but I don't know. That's why I'm kind of thinking, like, we were talking about when you have this neuroplasticity, and these imprints, can you rewire your brain? And that's what I'm kind of just doing, these experiments on myself. And so I don't know if I am cured. I'm just planning on every year I got to go to Mexico to do Ibogaine, and in the middle I may do some psilocybin, and this is kind of my new lifestyle. I've kind of taken the long road with my viewpoint, and this is the rest of my life. I'm not going to drink. I'm going to do TRE and TMS every now and then, meditation, holotropic breath work. Probably, I'm doing shadow work when I go do Ibogaine. And so, I don't know if there really is a cure, but I am better.
Your symptoms, at your worst here and after your treatments, are they?
Oh yeah, they're much better. Yeah, so when I take those tests, my symptoms are much better. Like I can go into Walmart now and not lose my mind. I used to go into Walmart or Schnucks and I was in and out, because everything was a threat. I'm staring at people's hands, and people had coats on, I would lose my mind. Overcoats, I'm like, couldn't do overcoats. And so a lot of that is gone now. But I still do have some effects from the post-traumatic stress. And so that's where I feel like part of this integration, I'm just going to continue having to work on that. And so that's part of what I'm trying to work on now is like, okay, the psilocybin journey I'm going to do, what's my intention going to be for that? And one thing I mentioned too, like with psilocybin, ayahuasca, you don't want to be real specific with your intentions because the medicine's going to give you what you need, right? Ibogaine's different. Ibogaine, you want to be specific. And so that was really weird for me, being familiar with psilocybin and ayahuasca. Whereas like when you do Ibogaine, I mean, I had 8 specific intentions I went down there with. You don't have to have them memorized, but it's just like the power of putting pen on paper. And so part of what we did was, I wrote down what these intentions were, and I took that down with me. And then on this other sheet of paper, I wrote down what I wanted to leave behind. And we do a little fire ceremony before you take the Ibogaine where, you can say, we're all 5 of us are around and you can say it out loud, or you don't have to say anything, but we all crumble up that piece of paper and throw it in the fire. And that's kind of the start of this process of, okay, I want to leave this stuff behind now. And so, part I want to work on next is, after the years of combat, you put up this, you basically kind of numb yourself emotionally because, do you guys want to hear this? Okay. So I used to hunt growing up. I was a big hunter, big fisher. Can't do it now. I tried doing it after my combat tours, and I just can't do it now. I have a hard time killing a deer because it's just, after you kill so many humans, and just watching your friends die, it's like you get to this point where you numb yourself. And so like the only emotions I ever felt was anger. That was it. That's all I felt. And that's what came up in the PTS with my wife and kids. And I still, to this day, I still don't feel love. I still don't feel happiness. I know I don't feel the fear and the anger and all the pain I used to feel, which is good. And so that's kind of what I'm, looking to work on for these next sessions is, I want to start getting back in touch with the good emotions again, that when you're in combat for so long, you lose touch with, you forget how to love. And so that's what I'm, going to work on next. And so that's why, it's hard because when I talk to these legislators, I'm always pretty open. I'm like, look, this isn't a magic pill. And Ethan's always like, stop saying that. I'm like, they're not going to pass Ibogaine if you keep telling them it's not a magic pill. I'm like, well, I'm just trying to be honest with them. I don't, so I'm probably going to tone that back a bit, make them think it is kind of a magic pill. But, to answer your question, I think it's just been like a mixture of, I think, kind of the ups and downs, doing the multiple psychedelics, integrating that with other alternative modalities. I'm also looking at acupuncture, because, I've had some friends do acupuncture. I'm doing sound baths now. That really helps. And so
Have you tried EMDR?
I have, yeah. I tried EMDR and that just didn't do much for me. Yeah. What I've heard of that either helps or it doesn't. It's like one or the other. And so I'm at a pretty good place with my PTS now. I'm more working on kind of other issues I've got from my combat and then my brain injuries that I've still got from all the pulling G's and that stuff. But I know I am doing better from those because, I'm working full time at Lindenwood now. I'm helping Ethan. I'm doing kid stuff. And, literally 10 months ago, I had a hard time getting out of bed by 1 a.m. Much less working a full-time job and, talking to you guys. And I just, helping my, and so, so I know I'm doing better from the neurological standpoint. That's why it's, and most of the veterans, we've created this kind of alternative network of therapies that we're using a lot of, and so, like in vet solutions, mostly special forces guys, but there are some conventional in there. But literally, like, I go to a meeting every Monday night and we're always like, hey, what has anybody tried now? And I'm like, hey, I just tried a sound bath 2 months ago. And a lot of the guys were like, what the hell is a sound bath? And so I explained it to them and they're like, wow, no shit, I need to try that. But yeah, guys are doing music therapy, art therapy. And so, but it's really funny, and we laugh about this because I'm also on a group, in a peer support group where it's all, we're all special forces guys that have kind of been through all this and done a lot of integration. and we still share stuff, but we'll laugh because, you know, I mean, we've got like this super tight connection now because, you know, we all shared time on the battlefield together, but then we've all shared time, I guess, you know, when I say time, I mean more like a spiritual aspect of time and healing, you know, with Ibogaine. And a lot of us have done ayahuasca as well and psilocybin. But, you know, we'll sit there and we'll just be like, oh, man, you know, I love you. Thanks for, you know, listening to me. You know, like like guys, I've had guys call me up and just sit there and bawl, and I'll just let them get it out. And they're like, oh, man, I love you. Thanks. But we'll get on these calls and laugh. We're like, you know, 20 years ago, would you ever thought that you'd be in your special forces unit telling dudes you love them and sitting there crying your heart out? And they're like, hell no, I would have gotten my ass ridden out of the unit if I'd done that. But, you know, there really is a pretty big shift going on in the veteran community with treatment. I think a lot of veterans, I think it's more of like those of us with severe PTSD and brain injuries are realizing Western medicine does not work well for those kind of injuries. And so the other part I picked up out of this was my spiritual connection. And so when I went down to Ambio, and, you know, forgive me if anybody in here is super religious, but I was like, you know, F God, you know, I hate God when I went down there. But under my 5-MeO experience, I sat with some kind of being that I assumed to be God. And so now I am very spiritual, but I'm not religious. So I think you guys probably understand where I'm coming from there. And so, and that's where like I've really been getting into the indigenous practices of spirituality, you know, with this connection with, you know, that we're all kind of connected in nature. And because of just, you know, the experience I've had. But it's funny, you know, because a lot of special forces guys, they've actually gotten more connected to their religiosity again. And so, you know, it's funny that like, it really just depends on the person. You know, so I have special forces friends who go to church all the time now. They're very practicing, very religious. I'm like, man, that's great for you. You know, I'm glad for you. But then there's some of us special forces guys that still don't have anything to do with religion, but we're very spiritual because of the experiences we've had under Ibogaine and 5 and, you know, and ayahuasca and psilocybin. And so, yeah, it's really interesting, you know, when you talk to a lot of people in the veterans community, because a lot of civilians have been doing this. I don't know, Timothy Leary left Harvard, what was that, late 60s? Was it 63? Yeah, I was going to say 67, maybe 63. But, you know, that whole, I mean, so what is that? 80 years?
60. But
or 60.
Aldous Huxley with Doors of Perception was what turned everybody on, and that was...
Yeah, that was 40s, I think, wasn't it? 50s?
Maybe 50s.
50s, yeah. So, you know, it's funny because the veteran community now is just figuring out, I think, what the rest of civilians who were experiencing psychedelics have known for 60, 70, 80 years. But I think it's because these, you know, hardened combat veterans are having these experiences and saying the same things civilians have been saying for 60 years. I think these, you know, a lot of legislators, especially conservative ones, are actually listening finally. And so that's a conversation that I've had a lot with Eben, is, you know, but I never would have guessed Texas would pass, you know, so before Texas passed the Ibogaine study, they passed the psilocybin one, I think 2 years before. And who in the hell would have ever guessed that Texas would pass research on psilocybin and Ibogaine? But a lot of that was driven by the veteran community in Texas. And Texas has a huge veteran community. And so that's what Eben and I are trying to do here in Missouri, the same thing here in Missouri. You know, to try to get the legislature to pass, and we're having this discussion right now about psilocybin or Ibogaine. And so, you know, I'm trying to push them towards the Ibogaine because I've done psilocybin too, and I've had some great experience with psilocybin, but it's more like a political thing, and I'm a political scientist, so, you know, I kind of understand this. But yeah, we're having these discussions amongst the lobbying realm right now about, you know, how do we attack this in the legislature? But we definitely have the conservative Missouri legislature's ear on this. I've had conversations with two different legislators in the last couple of weeks, and they're very interested in Ibogaine, because I think they all know about psilocybin, because if you guys aren't aware, psilocybin bills have been brought up in Missouri the last 3 years, I think. 2 years ago, it made it out of no, it didn't make it out of the Senate. No, it did make it out of the Senate. 2 years ago, it made it out of the Senate. The House didn't take it up. So everybody in Jeff City is familiar with psilocybin. Nobody's ever heard of Ibogaine. And I think, and people don't know about the power of Ibogaine with the addiction. And so that's why we're pushing this, because, I mean, a lot of states have a big problem with meth and opioids. And so that's why when I talk about this, I always talk about my alcoholism and how this is, I'm 11 months now, and, I'm thinking like my 1 year anniversary, I'm going to go celebrate myself to some ice cream, like an ice cream float or something. But, ayahuasca, psilocybin, that cannot do what Ibogaine did. And I don't know how Ibogaine did it, but somehow it took away my cravings for alcohol. And I don't understand how. And so, man, I'm going off on tangents.
That's great.
Sorry. Who else has a question?
What is that group or EPIN that you?
Oh, EPIN Thampy. So he's a lobbyist here in Missouri. And do you want to talk about EPIN?
Missouri.com is his website.
Okay.
So this weekend they are having a conference in Kansas City. But hopefully, if you let us know when you're going to Jeff City, we can put it out on our list too.
Okay.
And see, I think the power from what I'm hearing you say is in having veterans go. People
Yeah,
with
with Ibogaine. Yeah, that's what we're looking for, is people experience with Ibogaine.
So, one thing is, you don't see people recreationally using Ibogaine,
No.
which is another
Yeah.
plus.
I do know people that use Iboga recreationally, and I'm like, man, I would be worried about that. And Iboga is different, because Iboga, that's the root bark. And when you do Iboga, literally you take this sawdust and literally you throw it in your mouth and start eating it and just muscle it down with bottles of water. And so when you do Iboga, you have to do a lot of it to get in the cardiac realm of, because Iboga's got a lot of other stuff in it besides just the Ibogaine. And so I think when you hear about people doing Ibogaine recreationally, it's more Iboga they're doing. And that is safer, but I still wouldn't recommend it, because you can still get in the cardiac realm if you eat too much Iboga. And so, because I know people here in the States that are doing Iboga recreationally, and I've been offered that chance, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm like, I don't mind risking my life, but I'm not that brave. Ibogaine's a different story. Like Ibogaine, you really have to be careful, because you're getting the pure psychedelic Ibogaine out of the Iboga. And so, I can't remember what the amount that we took at Ambio was. Man, I want to say it was like 1.5 micrograms. I mean, it was a tiny amount. Like with psilocybin, you do like 4 or 5 grams and you're in a deep place with, 4 or 5 grams of psilocybin. Ibogaine, you're doing a very, very small amount to stay out of the cardiac realm, but you go for 14 hours with it. I'm not familiar with LSD. You probably know more about LSD than I would.
It's also in micrograms.
Yeah. Is it?
Yeah.
Okay.
So in the 60s, it was generally about 100 to 125 micrograms.
Okay, so it sounds like it's pretty similar to
And it's-
Ibogaine
and
then.
it's gotten over the years. It's like in the 80s, it was down into the 80s.
Okay.
So I was going to ask you, do you have any idea what your dose will be?
No.
LSD month?
So after December, I'm going to start talking to Larry, because he's pretty up to speed on LSD, and I'm going to start doing some research to figure out what dosage I'm going to take, and then the place I'm going to do it, I'm going to talk with them as well about dosage, so I can figure out, because I'm pretty good with psilocybin, I'm good with Ibogaine, ayahuasca is great. You drink as much as you want of ayahuasca. You're going to feel it when you purge it, but not everybody purges ayahuasca, and I hate those people. Same thing with Ibogaine, though. The woman, she didn't purge at all, and I'm like,
Sounds she didn't even have a hangover.
yeah, and I'm like, I hate you. She had no hangover. She didn't purge, and I'm like, that needs to be studied. I'm like, is there a physiological difference in how Ibogaine affects women than men? But yeah, the 4 guys, we're all like, man, I hate you, because we were all wrecks for 2 days, and 8 o'clock in the morning, she wants a breakfast sandwich, and we're just like,
Yeah,
Okay.
I guess it was just more of like trying to kind of understand where everything's kind of going, right?
Yeah.
Like what the goal is, right? Because if you say, it seems like legislature is going to say, you're trying to party, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going, this is the last thing I was going to do, right? I was going to get well.
Yeah.
And so it's like,
Yeah.
how do you formulate that into, it will help with your brain, right?
Yeah.
It helped with the gentleman last time that was talking with his arm.
Right.
Yeah, his arm didn't even work. It wasn't supposed to ever work again.
Yeah, Western medicine couldn't fix his arm, but
Right.
second layer of root bark from an African tree somehow
I
cures
didn't
his
even know what
arm.
it was.
Yeah.
Until
And
2
why,
weeks ago.
why do we have receptors for it?
And I feel like I've been around the block, you know? And so it's like, I don't know, I guess the reason for my question to you was,
Yeah.
for someone like me, I quit drinking about 12 years ago.
Oh, awesome.
And so, but it wasn't due to psychedelics.
Yeah.
It was, but I have a lot of history with veterans, that my father was.
Mhm.
And so I want to try to help in this cause in some sort of way.
Yeah.
But I don't really know how to do that, right? So
Yeah.
I like the fact that there's like these websites that you just brought up, Mike, and I kind of want to dig into that stuff and try to see, is there a place for someone who isn't a veteran, who hasn't gone through all the things that you've gone through that could
Yeah,
actually help your
That's a
cause?
great question. I think the best place for that would be integration coaches. Because I know a lot of veterans who have done psychedelics on their own, like got a hold of some mushrooms without any kind of, I call it parental supervision, but without any kind of a coach there. And they've ended up in bad place, what's been termed as
I can only imagine.
a bad trip.
Yeah.
They've ended up, unleashing some demons they didn't plan on dealing with. And so I think where non-veterans can help, and I know veterans doing this, like I said, I'm doing this, but I'm not paying somebody $10,000, but I think integration coaching, I think can really help. And have had discussions with my therapist, Larry, about this, because you see some trained therapists are starting to reach out to MAPS about getting trained in assisted psychotherapy. And Larry does it right now with ketamine. But the problem with ketamine's like 5-MeO. It's so fast. It's hard, he's told me it's hard to do psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy with ketamine because it's so damn fast. I've never done ketamine, but I think the integration coaching piece can help. And that's why I was talking with Mike about this earlier. I think the problem with psychedelics is it's still got that nasty stigma on it. That Nixon and the whole, war on drugs started. So I think that's where the veterans are like trying to knock that down. Once we get rid of that, I think having people knowledgeable with the integration piece, because I think when I talk to veterans that I'm helping as a peer supporter, I always tell them, hey man, you're gonna have a good time on Ibogaine, you're gonna feel like shit, but you may see some cool stuff, and 5-MeO is gonna blow your mind. But your actual healing happens when you get back home. And that's where the integration happens, and you need to take advantage of that neuroplastic period that you have. And with Ibogaine, one of the weird things, and I don't know where AMBO gets this from, but like they tell you, when you leave here, don't drink alcohol and don't drink coffee, because your body metabolizes the Ibogaine into a chemical called neribogaine, and that exists in your liver and your kidneys and filters up to your brain for we don't know how long, months, years after. And so that's why Ibogaine has got such a strong neuroplastic effect compared to ayahuasca, the DMT or 5-MeO DMT, or psilocybin, is because of they think it has something to do with the metabolizing of the Ibogaine into this chemical called neribogaine. But they don't know, there's like so much they don't know about Ibogaine. That's why we want to study it. But somehow AMBO knows, and AMBO is doing research on this, but they always tell, don't drink alcohol and don't drink coffee, because that flushes the neribogaine out of your system. And so that's why I came home, and luckily I stopped drinking caffeine after ayahuasca. That appears to be working, but from a scientific standpoint, you know, a sample size of 1 is not a very good sample size. So, yeah, that's a great question. So I think the way like you guys could help out is, you know, because you guys are all really familiar with, you know, a lot of the alternative healing modalities that are out there, and that's a part of integration. And so, you know, I think just getting into the integration coaching side and being there to help not just veterans, but, you know, I've had discussions with Ethan about this, about, okay, yeah, we're talking about studying Ibogaine, but, you know, there's also a spiritual healing side of Ibogaine that needs to be tapped into. And there's also an emotional healing side. You know, I'm like, you know, so you're going to give people these pills. What are you going to do when they start digging up shit they weren't planning on digging up? How are you going to deal with that? You know, in this research, you know, medical setting, like you're going to need some kind of therapy or coaching or something. And so I think that's one way that, you know, people can help is the integration coaching side, working with therapists. And that's all kind of, you know, when you look at MAPS is training therapists, but there's not enough therapists to do just regular psychotherapy, much less psychedelic-assisted psychotherapy. So that's where I think there's going to have to be people, you know, like us that are experienced with psychedelics and with integration stepping in to fill that void. We're like, yeah, I can't help you deal with the demons you're digging up, but I can help you with integrating and building new pathways and new lifestyles and that kind of stuff. And that's kind of, I don't want to call it a life coach because I don't like that term, but it's kind of along those lines. Yeah, that's a great question though. Yeah.
Coming out of the military, entering civilian life like years before drugs, whether that be pharmaceuticals or some of the experimental stuff, did you have any preconceptions about psychedelics and how did they change? What changed them? How did that kind of evolve?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, you know, when I was in the military, you know, I was like standard, you know, initial, you know, like, you know, conservative Republican, like, you know, psychedelics are bad, you know, only hippies do those. And, you know, it's funny talking to a lot of my friends who are veterans, we all had the same opinion, you know. And so, you know, I think initially, you know, my experiences in Iraq when I was on the ground, that really kind of opened my eyes up to what just, you know, what suffering is. But I think what really changed my opinion on psychedelics was, you know, when I was in the depths of my PTS, and the medication, the Western medication wasn't working. And I was just, you know, I was at the point where my suicidality, where I'm like, you know, I'm going to find a way if I don't find something. And my wife was initially, she's got a PhD in biochemistry from Duke. And so she was initially against me going to do ayahuasca. And I just found this out that Larry talked to her and said, look, you need to let him go do this. Like, I'm telling you, I don't know if he's going to be here if you don't let him go do ayahuasca. I don't have another answer. He's in a bad place. And so I think what changed it for me personally was I had just gotten in such a bad place where I had no other out other than taking my own life. And, you know, it's funny, you always hear, forgive me, I don't want to get into too much into suicidality because that's a really tough subject to talk about. But having lived through that for the last couple of years, I think when you get into that place, that's really what changed psychedelics for me. And a lot of the veterans that I'm friends with in these groups, they've all been in the same dark place dealing with suicidality. And so I think it's when you get to that point, you're like, fuck it, man, I need something. Fuck it, I'll eat some mushrooms if that's going to help. And I think that's kind of why you see so many veterans turning to psychedelics now, because a lot of us have been in that place from, you know, our combat, you know.
Did your attitude towards them change after your first experience?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, when I came back from doing ayahuasca, I was just like, oh, I mean, even during my ayahuasca, I was like, I mean, it freaked me out, you know, because ayahuasca is very communal when you do it. You know, like psilocybin, you know, you can do it outside in a group, and you can, if you want to do some shadow work, you can do it, you know, on your own. Ayahuasca, I don't know if anybody ever doing it on their own. It's always a communal thing. And so that, you know, the first time I did it, you know, there's a guy who brought a bear skin with him. And so I'm like psychedelic, watching a bear walk around the ceremony room, and I about lost my mind. because this is my first night, this conservative, traditional military guy doing ayahuasca, and I'm watching a bear walk around the room. I was just like, oh my God. And I was like losing my mind that first night. I was just like, what the hell have I done? And so the second ceremony, the second night, that's when like I really opened up and ayahuasca really hit me. And so when I came home, I was just like, holy cow. And immediately after ayahuasca, I was just like, psychedelics are really powerful. But I think I was like every other person that does it for the first time, where like you're thinking it's a magic bullet, a magic pill. And I very quickly realized that it's not. But yeah, I'm advocating for it down in Jeff City. So obviously I'm 100% behind psychedelics now. But yeah, I'm not, I don't have any issue with people that do it recreationally. I personally don't do it recreationally. I do it more for healing. And I think it's, people that, I'm around groups that do it recreationally, and I'm like, yeah, have fun with it, knock yourself out. And so, yeah, I'm not against people doing it recreationally. That's just not, it's not called, I'm not feeling that calling myself to do it recreationally. Right now, I do it more for healing. So that's kind of my outlook on it. Does that answer your question? That was a good question. Yeah. Cool. Any other questions?
I just want to raise, I mentioned it before, have you heard of the Fireside Project?
No.
So if you want to get free training on integration, the Fireside Project is a group that will train you. I think now the requirement is like 200 hours in the first year to volunteer for the training. But they
200 hours of what?
Volunteering. So you commit, you get the training for free.
So you basically sit with a coach, or you
But
sit during
it's all
ceremonies?
online, and what they do is they match you with people who call in demographically. So in other words, if you would be working with veterans in your age group, if you do it, you would work with people who fit your background and age group. But it's a really good training for free,
like
as
it.
long as you give back to the community.
Yeah.
You get the training for free, and it's intense. And it's good.
Fireside?
The Fireside Project. And they have cohorts. So it depends on when, I think the opening might be for the next cohort in spring.
And it's all online?
Yeah, I mean, you work over the phone or Zoom with people, but yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to check
But
it
it's not, you don't have to go anywhere, it doesn't cost you money.
Yeah, I think that would be huge, because I think we're starting to see that the negative connotation behind psychedelics in society is starting to kind of be broken down. And so I think there's going to be a huge need for integration coaches and for integration centers. And so I'm talking with this Marine I told you about. He and I are talking about starting up an integration center where you come right out of this psychedelic journey and you go right into this center where you spend a week, 10 days of, learning just all these different alternative modalities, art therapy, TMS, TRE, acupuncture, just all kinds of stuff. And, and you're still also meeting with integration coaches at the same time. You go home with a plan. He and I are like developing this like integration center. And so, obviously capitalism is going to jump in here like it always does. But, I really see there's like a big opportunity for psychedelics. I think what Timothy Leary saw 60 years ago, I think, finally we're starting to see that societal breakdown. And so, I'm giving a talk on Tuesday of this coming week to the Lieutenant Governor of Missouri, to Senator Schmidt's office, to lawyers, business owners, the head of the Missouri Veterans Commission. And I'm sharing my story, much more condensed version than the 45-minute one you guys got. I've only got 8 minutes because the Lieutenant Governor is going to speak too. But yeah, I'm sharing the same story with, conservative, business Missouri, St. Louis, that doesn't really know much about psychedelics.
But they know about all of the issues that people have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because either they have them themselves or they know somebody who does, or they're related to somebody.
Yeah, and that's a great point you brought up. And I think one of the limitations of this being like a veteran-only thing is when you're talking about legislation and trying to get legislators to pass stuff, they're open to passing veteran legislation, but the problem is that legislatures only have so much throughput. The session only meets for so long. There's only so many days in a week they're there, and so they have to prioritize bills, right? And so, yeah, they're always supporting bills for veterans, but they've got other stuff they have to pass, for their constituents. Well, it's like, what if we show up with this bill on Ibogaine where we're like, this is going to help every person in your district that has a problem with meth, opioids, cocaine. That's going to make this Ibogaine thing like, oh shit, we probably need to look at passing this because this could help some really big problems I have in my district. And so that's where I think, that's why, we're talking about how do we market this as far as like moving forward. But then I think once we get the Ibogaine research done, I think psilocybin's like right there. I was talking to Epen about this, but I think that Secretary Kennedy, Epen was saying that Secretary Kennedy and the DEA, this is like public knowledge, that him and the DEA and the FBI, they're looking at rescheduling psilocybin in the next year to Schedule 2 or 3. So it's basically got some medicinal use now. And so I'm like, man, that would be huge because that would take care of then it would be easier here in Missouri to research psilocybin. WashU's been trying to do that for a couple of years now, but they can't get the funding for it. And so, yeah, so I think that's why I think veterans are pushing this. It's like, hey, we need to break this barrier down. Let's start doing the research. And at the same time, we're going to need people to integrate this, to help with the spirituality. We need therapists to help with the emotional side. So I know MAPS has been behind that for decades. But yeah, that's kind of my outlook on where I see this going.
Just a quick comment on how to market it. To speak the capitalist language. There's also an advantage of being one of the first movers on something like Ibogaine therapy. Like people are flying to Mexico to do this. People will fly to Texas to do this. People come to Missouri to do this.
Well, and it's funny when you use the marijuana movement here in Missouri, very similar. And that's where I think a lot of this psilocybin Ibogaine talk here in Missouri, talking to Epen, really is leveraging the marijuana movement that just happened here. And it's the same concept as far as from a funding standpoint. And it's like, hey, look, hey, if we, Ibogaine's a little different because I don't think I hope Ibogaine doesn't ever end up where you can walk into a dispensary and pick it up. Because that would scare the hell out of me, honestly. But with psilocybin, I'm like, man, that'd be great if psilocybin ended up like that too. I'm like, if people that want to do it recreationally, great, knock yourself out. It's like drinking alcohol, just be safe with it. You got to know I'm going to have this 6-hour period where I've got to not drive anywhere and, that kind of stuff. But yeah, and so I don't know. I feel like we're kind of breaking down, I guess, the barriers that Timothy Leary tried to do back in the 60s. But, I think we're doing it in a different way, I think. But I think we're going to have to figure it out. And and it's funny, I was talking with Epen and I'm like, man, I hope this Ibogaine thing doesn't just end up as this addiction therapy because there's so much more potential behind it when you look at the spiritual growth that you can get out of it, the emotional healing you can get out of it. And so, yeah, the physical too, with neurological things that nobody knows how. But there's all these anecdotal stories of people with serious injuries that they can walk now, they can move their arm. My neck doesn't bother me anymore. And nobody knows how. I've still got tinnitus in my ears from all the bomb explosions and stuff. So I'm hoping my next bout with Ibogaine will get rid of the tinnitus. That's going to be one of the things I put on my to-do list for Ibogaine. Get rid of the damn ringing in my ears. Tired of it. Yeah, great question. Any other questions?
And I also think, I don't know if in your conversations with Epen, you're also bringing in about the capitalist language, about how much money this is going to save. I mean, everybody knows about, or I would hope that at least in the legislature, they know about the unit cost of pain and suffering.
Yeah.
But when you look at how much money at the VA, how much goes to pharmaceutical companies, there's kind of a double-edged sword there.
Yeah.
Because they're really the people, I believe, who are trying to make sure this doesn't get passed.
Yeah, and Epen and I have already had those discussions because anytime, if you guys aren't familiar with lobbying, so what I'm doing is called advocacy, What EPIN does is lobbying. They're slightly different. They're different. But lobbying, you've always got somebody who doesn't want the bill to pass. And so to Mike's point, we're fighting big pharma. My answer to big pharma is that with Ibogaine, I wish Charlie was here, because she really knows about her horticulture, and I don't know if we can grow Ibogaine plants here in the U.S. And there's only so many of them that are being grown in Western Africa, because that's where they're indigenous to. And so, I know MAPS has had discussions about how do we ethically harvest Ibogaine without wrecking the trees that are there, because there are tribes in Western Africa that still use the iboga trees as part of their tribal living, and we don't want to wreck all that. And so I'm like, why don't we just synthesize it? Get damn big pharma on board. Hey, you don't want this ROI. I'm like, okay, I get the mushroom thing, because mushrooms are easier to grow. I mean, there are psilocybin mushrooms growing everywhere, but iboga only grows in Western Africa. And there's some concern about how do we ethically harvest this, because it's taken off. Like, well, if big pharma can figure out how to synthesize whatever that molecule is in Ibogaine, there you go. There's your ROI.
Same thing with 5-MeO.
Yeah. They've already done that with 5-MeO, so we don't have to go, ransack the poor Sonoran desert toads so we can, get their venom. But there are still people that do that, and I'm like, man, I wouldn't want somebody come jack me up right after a thunderstorm at night because they want my venom. Yeah, so we've already synthesized 5-MeO. I know there. I actually know there. When I was struggling, I looked at getting on a study with psilocybin. There are small pharmaceutical companies that are synthesizing psilocybin, and they're doing studies on it. And so I looked at getting into one of those. I decided not to. It was probably a good call because there was no kind of therapy help. And I'm like, I'm a veteran with post-traumatic stress, right? And you're not going to give me any therapy? I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to partake in your study. There was some group in Canada somewhere that was doing this. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going to do that. But yeah, so we've already synthesized psilocybin and 5-MeO. But even big pharma is not getting in on the psilocybin, because that's where I think, because iboga, you don't find it everywhere. Whereas psilocybin you do. Well, not everywhere, but you find it in more places than you do. And I mean, hell, now you can get spores off the internet and grow them in your own house if you want to. So I can see why big pharma wouldn't touch that. But I see some differences with iboga, and maybe that Ibogaine is something they'll look at. But yeah, that's something I've talked to EPIN about. Like, hey, we're trying to look at funding. Let's talk to big pharma about Ibogaine and the need to synthesize it. And this may be an ROI, because it's not like we have iboga trees growing out of our house, out of our front door, the way you do like a live oak or something. So yeah, that maybe is a possibility down the road. Yeah, if anybody wants to make some money. There you go. How many of you hadn't heard about Ibogaine before 2 weeks ago, or before the talk last month? Okay, so quite a few have never heard of Ibogaine before. Yeah, I'd heard of it. I think when I did ayahuasca, I'd heard of Ibogaine, because there was a SEAL with me when I did ayahuasca, and he had done Ibogaine, and he had an awful experience with it. And so I remember after hearing his experience on Ibogaine, I'm like, I don't want to do Ibogaine, because he was like, get this shit out of me, and he was like going crazy, and he was like, I was like that for 12 hours, and I'm like, man, I don't want to do that. So I'd heard of Ibogaine from this Navy SEAL who had a bad experience on it. But from my ayahuasca retreats. But yeah, it's funny, like even in the psychedelic world, a lot of people haven't heard of Ibogaine or iboga. But as far as like the experience, it's very much like, kind of like, how you can go deep and do shadow work with psilocybin. It's kind of like that, but it's just a lot more intense, a lot longer. As far as like, the work you can do with Ibogaine. So like people ask me, oh, what's it like? Well, it's kind of like psilocybin. The one thing I would add though, I meant to talk about this earlier, sorry. I'm a big fan of doing a 5-MeO chaser with Ibogaine. And there are some places that do 5-MeO before. I think it's better to do it after, because I leveraged my Ibogaine experience in order to, like, I told you guys I had to reach down deep to really give up and to, experience that complete ego dissolution and ego death. I'm like, I leveraged what I experienced and some of the things I saw in Ibogaine to do that. And if I hadn't done Ibogaine before 5-MeO, I don't think I would have gone to that place in 5-MeO that I was able to go to. And so, that's why I'd never even heard of doing a 5-MeO chaser with Ibogaine. I'm like, you people are freaking nuts. I'm like, I'm going to do Ibogaine, and then 18 hours later, I'm going to do 5-MeO. I'm like, you're crazy. I'm like, man, it's pretty powerful. And I think there's a place in Mexico that does psilocybin with a 5-MeO chaser too. And so there were in the psychedelic world, people are starting to experience with doing 5-MeO chasers with psilocybin and Ibogaine. I don't know if you guys have heard of doing like 5-MeO chasers, but that's kind of a big deal too down in Mexico. I don't know if there's any. Have you heard of anybody up here doing that?
I've never heard of the concept of chasing one
It's
psychedelic with
pretty.
another.
It's pretty powerful.
5-MeO's become really popular in itself.
Yeah, just by itself. Yeah, I think when you leverage like if you do shadow work with either Ibogaine or psilocybin, and then you jump into 5, I think that's where you can have some major breakthroughs on 5-MeO.
It seems like it's so fast and so powerful that you would like to have another experience before you take that. Like you're saying, to leverage it. Like if you had not let go during Ibogaine, 5-MeO would be overwhelming. Without that experience, I think, before.
Yeah, and I think with 5 too, when you go to Ambio, they let you do it twice. And some people do it once, and they're like, it's funny, the Marine I was telling you about, his buddy had a breakthrough like I did. And it's funny, like he did 5 once, and he got in it, and it's funny talking to him afterwards. He's like, yeah, I got in it, and I thought about what my buddy told me about kind of giving in and experiencing death, and he's like, I got in it, and I was like, oh, fuck no. And I was like, get me out of this. I don't want to do this. And so he's like, he just wasn't ready for it. And that's where, like, I think I was in that place because of, just my ongoing bouts with suicidality, my, 2-day long period of, shadow work with Ibogaine, put me in that place where I was able to have this experience with 5-MeO. But that was, and I'm looking forward to going down there and doing that again. But it's a pretty intense 4.5 days, because you do the sweat lodge for 2 hours, and that really loosens you up. Then you jump into Ibogaine, then you finish it off with 5-MeO, and you come out of there and you're like a wet rag that's been wrung out about 15 different ways. But you're feeling like, I remember I walked in the airport in San Diego and just broke down crying. And I'm sure, it's crowded San Diego airport, and I'm sitting there on the phone crying, and I've got people like, what's wrong with that guy? And they're like doing this, and I'm just like, I don't care. I'm just crying. And because it was just, it's a rough 4.5 days, but man, you come out of it. And, the guys I'm helping right now, they're both like, holy shit, this is, one of the guys never done psychedelics before. The other guy had. The other guy, I think, is kind of struggling with opening up a little bit. As you guys know, you really got to open up to get the experience of psychedelics. If you fight it, you're not going to have a good time. But this one guy, he's just like, this is amazing. And I was like, yeah, I'm like, okay, hey, love this, experience this. I'm like, we got some work to do though, because, the backside's where you heal. And so that's that kind of the message that, we keep putting out. It's like, hey, 95% of your healing now happens when you get home. We call it the pink fluffy time, when you come home and you're like, I love everybody and life is great. Yeah, we call it the pink fluffy unicorn afterglow. But Ibogaine, that sticks around longer than ayahuasca does. I think ayahuasca went away after like 2 weeks, 3 weeks, maybe. Ibogaine, 2 months later, I was still in the pink fluffy stage. It wore off, it slowly wore off, but it was longer than ayahuasca and psilocybin. Yeah, Jim.
Yeah. Can you explain what you mean by shadow work? I have a concept, but I want to hear.
Yeah. So,
Where does that come from?
and this is kind of in the meditation world too. There's like shadow work you can do in meditating, which is where, and talking to my meditation instructor, that's like next level meditation where you're preparing yourself for death. But it's like where you go inside and you really start going down deep and digging up stuff that you've really packed down in there inside. Pulling up trauma. That's what kind of shadow work is. At least
The ugly stuff.
yeah, in my experiences, and it's really where you learn how to let go. That's kind of where I see the power behind shadow work is learning how to let go. And if you can learn how to let go, and what I mean by let go is like letting go of this idea that we have of life, that we've built up over our 40, 50 years of our, materialistic, I don't want to sound like what my conservative friends would call like a socialist or a communist, but we built up this idea of what life should be like in Western world, right? If you can let go of that and you can let go of your fear of actually living, that's what shadow work, I think, buys you. And so then when you do Ibogaine or you do like a 5 gram, I've heard one guy doing 8 grams of mushrooms. I'm like, man, that's a lot of mushrooms. Damn. Yeah, it depends on the mushroom and the batch, but yeah. But, when you go deep, that's kind of what you're working on is, okay. And I mean, it's tough. If you've never done it, it's tough and it's tiring and it takes a lot out of you. And that's the integration from that. Like, what am I learning from this? That takes a long time. I mean, I'm still integrating my Ibogaine journey from that work that I did. Yeah, and so that's kind of what my idea of shadow work is. What is that kind of close to what you have, or is it?
I'm Jungian, so.
You're what?
Jungian.
Oh, yeah.
Carl.
Okay.
So the shadow is in order to get to self-realization, you have to go through the shadow.
Yeah, that's kind of the same thing. Yeah, that's kind of what it is.
And I know you didn't want to talk about the details of your experience.
Oh, I mean, if you guys want to hear them, I don't mind sharing. I just don't like tainting people. Is the only reason why I'm not a big fan of sharing.
You said you sat with someone that you thought was divine.
Oh, with 5-MeO, yeah. So basically with that experience, what happened was, so my 5-MeO experience, and this is different than what other people have seen. So all I saw was this light at the end of the tunnel. It's kind of what you've heard from people having near-death experiences. And I had these rays of light coming at me. And so in my head, I was screaming. And as I'm screaming, I'm giving up. Like this idea in my head, I'm screaming is like a metaphor for me, like letting go of like all my trauma that I've been carrying for years. And so as I'm screaming in my head louder and louder, I'm getting closer and closer to this light. And my buddy Slider is coaching me. He said he can tell that I'm getting there, but I'm not there yet. He said every now and then I'll let a moan out. He said my body was kind of fidgety and he could tell I was kind of fighting. And so I'm getting closer and closer to this light. And I hear him telling me, hey, you're almost there. Just give in. You're almost there. And so I get right up to the light and I can feel the warmth of this light. And I'm like, okay, I'm sitting with the divine now. I'm there. And I hear him tell me, hey, you're just about there. Let go. And when he did that, I reached down. I'm sorry, I still get choked up, and sometimes I tear up when I say this, but I reached down inside. And I remember I went down and I thought about when I was under Ibogaine, I asked the medicine, and you can ask the medicine questions. And so I was like, hey, Ibogaine. And I asked like, hey, Ibogaine, what does my family want from me? And I saw my family come to me in a photo and they said, we just want you to be happy. And so I thought about that when he said that, and I reached down and he said, and all my friends, my cohort were out there. It was out on the ground, on this, overlooking the beach. And he said, I let out the most blood-curdling scream that everybody for 2 miles probably heard. He said it was the most beautiful blood-curdling scream that I let out, but it was me releasing all my trauma that I've been carrying around for 20 or 30 years. And as soon as I did that, in my mind, I saw black smoke leave my body, and it went through this light into a realm of infinite space and time. And my buddy said I was there for probably 5 to 7 minutes, and he could tell I got there because my body just went limp. But I have no memory of what happened there, because I had no brain functioning going on. But all I know is I felt nothing but warmth and love for that 7 minutes I was there. The hardest thing I've ever done is let go of my conscious self. And I think that's the shadow work. And to do that, you have to go deep. And that's where going deep with psilocybin, going deep with Ibogaine, and I've heard of people doing that with psilocybin, where they've been able to go deep and give up their conscious self with psilocybin. And so I think that to me is like, when I talk about shadow work, but that was the realm I went to. And so having experienced that now, even today, I have a completely different outlook on life after being able to experience, what I guess is I'm actually reading the Tibetan Book of the Bed, because that's one of the stages of the Bardo. And so I guess I've got to experience that under 5-MeO. And so now I'm like, I wasn't afraid of death before, obviously, but I'm like, sweet, man, I can't wait to experience that again, because it's nothing but warmth and love, man. I'm excited.
It's different without the fear.
Yeah.
You can get through
Yeah.
that ego death and let go.
Yeah.
And to me, it's like there's the eternal part of whatever I think I am.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I think now just knowing what my actual existence is, because I've experienced it,
Changes everything.
yeah, my complete outlook on life. People cut me off all the time. You guys know St. Louis drivers. I'm like, look at that idiot. Yeah. Whereas before I would have lost my mind and gotten in a car accident. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah. Hopefully that helps. Yeah, thanks. I'm glad I was able to come share that with you.
Hi, my name is Alyssa Weinrich. Psychedelic STL is a nonprofit organization focused on educating the public about the therapeutic and transformative potential of psychedelics. Scan the QR code on the screen if you want to learn more about Psychedelic STL. We host a variety of different events, from talks about research, policy, to social events like hangouts, potlucks, movie screenings. If you want to learn more about Psychedelic STL, you can check out our website at psychedelicstl.org or scan the QR code and sign up for our newsletter, and you'll get the monthly info right to your email.